Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
I'm 49 years old, and my wife is 48. We've been together for 2 decades, and we have a couple of kids, a 16-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl. A few months back, I came to know that my wife had an affair with a guy for a brief period 15 years ago, and she was on the verge of leaving me for him. Then the man ended things with her, so the only reason she stuck around with me for the past 15 years was because I was her backup plan. The worst part about this whole mess was how I discovered it. We're a pretty traditional and conservative family. That's how we were raised, and I thought that's how we always were. That's why this revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Around 4 months ago, my son wanted to play an old-school video game, the kind we used to enjoy on PCs back in the day. I used to play those a lot when he was younger, so I had a bunch of PC game discs. He was searching for a specific game, so I told him to check the garage. When he stumbled upon the PC, driven by nostalgia or curiosity, he started digging through various files. He fired up the PC and got caught up in exploring folders, taking a trip down memory lane. Most of the computer's memory seemed to have been erased. He managed to restore the latest saved memory, which brought back the most recently deleted files. That old PC had been sitting in the garage for over 11 years, and he stumbled upon some interesting photos from years ago. Then he opened a downloaded folder and began going through the pictures to see their content. That's when he came across a bunch of graphic photos featuring his mom and another man engaging in close activities. These vivid images left him in shock and disgust. He was aware that his mom was married when those pictures were taken. Not knowing how to approach me, he decided to confide in his older sister. She was equally stunned, and together they found the courage to bring this matter to my attention. Few days down the line, I'm just parked in front of the TV after a day's grind, when my son and daughter roll up and let me know they've got something serious to drop on me. Judging by the way they're carrying themselves, I can tell that things aren't all good, so I'm all ears. Then my son steps up and starts laying out how he went hunting for a game disc in the garage, and then decided to pull a move and bring back some deleted files on the computer. And wouldn't you know it, that's how he stumbled upon a whole bunch of pictures showing their mom doing that with another guy. Once they spilled out the whole story, I found myself at a loss for where to even start. It was beyond horrifying, not just because my wife had been unfaithful, but also because my son had glimpsed those graphic images of his own mother. I had no clue how far this affair had gone, so I lugged the PC over to the dining table, fired it up, and dove into the very pictures they were talking about. I can't even put into words how stunned I felt. Those detailed snapshots depicted my wife in her younger days, back around the time our 2 kids were born. The images were vivid and numerous, a whole collection of them. I counted a total of 52, and they showcased her in poses that made my stomach churn. Like she was some sort of adult film star, while her affair partner played the role of the photographer. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that my son had seen those images. I decided to conduct a hasty investigation before my wife returned home. Knowing the passwords for her old email address, I went through her messages, focusing on the dates when those pictures were downloaded. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any exchanges between her and her affair partner. When my wife's car rolled into the driveway, I instructed my kids to stay put in their room, shielding them from the upcoming confrontation. As soon as my wife stepped inside, I beckoned her over to the dining table. I aimed to catch her off guard, uncertain if the affair was still ongoing. As she approached the dining room, her face bore an expression of curiosity. I observed her response as I scrolled through those graphic images of her and her lover. At first, she covered her mouth in a shocked reaction. Ensuring she understood the situation, I explained that our son and daughter had discovered the images and held on to the secret until their guilt became too much. Tears welled up in her eyes as I confronted her about the duration of the affair, and that's when she revealed it had occurred 15 years ago. It took quite a bit of pressing and accusing throughout our entire relationship for her to finally admit that the affair involved only the man depicted in the photos. She only came clean because I caught her off guard. And here's the kicker. After he ended things, she sank into depression. Instead of confessing to me, she turned to my mother, who then guided her into therapy. The therapist herself was involved in an open relationship, which is a whole other story, so my mother used her own funds to pay for therapy, as both of them shared a skewed concept of self-improvement that conveniently left out the truth from me. So here I stand, finding out 15 years down the line that my wife was unfaithful, and I seem to be the last to know. I suppose she figured I'd divorce her if I knew, which I guess kind of makes sense. Better to let sleeping dogs lie, right? She spent every day for 15 years living a lie. And to add to it, she teamed up with my own mother to keep this filthy secret under wraps. The level of betrayal is beyond words. It was only after the other guy ended things that she turned to my mother. And my mother, in turn, comforted her and shielded the truth from me. I could dive into discussing the kind of person my mother is, but given this new revelation and what I've put up with from her before, let's just say it wouldn't be a very flattering depiction. She's probably feeling regretful, I guess, and she's asking for forgiveness now. But after she hid this for so long, her remorse is a bit too little. Too late. Is there any authenticity in anything cheaters do? She wanted us to address this with a therapist, claiming that a therapist helped her navigate her affair. And let me tell you about the peculiar therapist my mother got her involved with. It's quite a tale. She was in tears there in the dining room, after she spilled the truth and pleaded for forgiveness. Her surprise was evident when I told her to leave the house. I wasn't exactly forcing her, but I couldn't bear the thought of sharing a roof with her anymore. My son had already been deeply affected when he stumbled upon those repulsive pictures of her, so I'm not sure what she thinks she gains by continuing this marriage, especially since I was apparently just a backup plan. She even cooked up a timeline, although it's pretty pointless to me. Still, I couldn't resist reading through it. It detailed her being fed nonsense during those deceitful therapy sessions, where she was told to shoulder the guilt herself, citing reasons and family issues and whatnot, basically a load of rubbish. I guess she had this all figured out in her mind, just in case the truth came out. Quite wicked, if you ask me. I asked her how she planned to make up for holding me hostage all these years, and not surprisingly, she had no answers. The sting of it all is quite something. My wife lying to me for 15 years, and even my own mother being in on the scheme. She went so far as to pay out of her own pocket to assist my wife. You can also tell something's off from the type of therapist they chose. The therapist was part of some open marriage and polyamory scene or whatever. To be honest, it's pretty bizarre that she's both a therapist and into that kind of stuff. Seems like the last person you'd want to talk to after pulling off an affair. Makes me wonder if my mom's got a few skeletons in her closet too, ready to cause even more chaos after the bomb already exploded. The so-called therapist my mom shelled out cash for is, in my book, nothing more than a harlot. She must have fed her all sorts of ideas. Even if she had gone to a legitimate therapist, I bet she'd be spoon-fed the lines to say. How about suggesting things like, come clean to your husband, keep your promises, spare your kids the trauma? Guess none of that crossed her mind. So, this clueless swinger pretending to be a therapist told her to keep it under wraps. Alright, let's break it down. You cheat, and then you cheat again by paying for so-called advice that anyone with half a brain could think of. Did my wife really need to drop cash on a fancy version of don't tell him, imagine if he cheated? Seriously, am I supposed to buy into that? So, instead of my cheating wife doing the right thing and confessing to me, she spilled her secret to my mom. And what did my dear mom do? She decided to play along and deceive me right alongside my wife. Just adds up, considering my mom's a bit of a no-good loser. Yeah, that fits the bill. I probably have to do a DNA test on my kids, but honestly, we look so much alike, it's like I cloned myself. They've got some of my genetic traits too, but if it turned out they weren't mine, it'd feel like my whole world was shattered, not just a part of it. It'd be too much for me to handle, honestly. I'd probably just hit the delete button on myself. Not 'cause it's their fault or anything. I mean, I couldn't live with that kind of truth. It'd just be too heavy to carry, you know? Finding out that my whole life was a lie, not just half of it, would be soul-crushing. Oh, by the way, the guy my wife fooled around with wasn't even married back then. He was just using her for some fun, and then dumped her when he got his fill. I did some digging on him, but he's vanished from where he used to be. Can't find a trace of him anymore. After my cheating wife packed her bags and left, I gave my mom a call and confronted her. She had the nerve to say she was trying to keep the family together. I told her that by doing what she did, she stripped me of my right to make a choice. She's lost all access to my family now, that's for sure. I asked her if her whole progressive lefty Christian facade was worth cutting off ties with her own son and grandkids forever. Might have come across as tough talk, but when she didn't respond, I figured being a martyr for my wayward wife was worth it in her eyes. Ending my marriage wasn't my choice. She already made that call 15 years back when she cheated on me. I stuck around in the marriage based on false pretenses. Yeah, sure, she apparently improved after therapy, except for the whole lying and holding me hostage thing. Supposedly she became a better person thanks to therapy, but that's a big fat lie if you ask me. I mean, seriously, if you need therapy to teach you basic decency or how to show empathy, then you're probably just an all-around useless person. I mean, come on. Do you need a tutorial on how to breathe too? Maybe I'm not saying it eloquently, but what I'm getting at is that my wife is all show, even if her changes are legit. It's quite telling that my wife had to take advice from a woman whose sole life purpose seems to be hooking up and heading for eternal damnation, just to learn how to be a better person. It's frustrating how the cheater seems to end up just fine in the end. Whether they stay together or split, they somehow come out unscathed, while the faithful spouse is the one suffering. If you add up the pain of all the cheaters, past, present, and future, whether they're remorseful or not, it still wouldn't amount to even 0.1% of the pain felt by a good spouse. I've got a lawyer on board and we're gearing up to serve her soon. I guess that swinging therapist of hers is probably out of a job now. After all these years of her ineffective advice, there are always other opportunities out there, so she'll manage. But let me tell you, divorce laws are a mess. I've been living a lie all this time while still being married. Everything I've earned since her affair should rightfully be mine. I know these divorce laws were likely made by cheaters themselves, but it's still downright unjust to me. I had a chat with my lawyer, and he's laying out how much of my assets I'll have to give up in this divorce, and it's making me furious. Imagine divorcing a cheater, only for them to go on and remarry, with my money. It's a ridiculous situation. Anyone who does that, whether they're a harlot or a pig, is just despicable and deserves to face the consequences. I've been robbed of years of my life, and I shouldn't have to part with anything I earned. Just because it's a law doesn't automatically mean it's a good one, like that whole no-fault divorce thing. Remember, there was a time when owning slaves was legal, and you could even destroy them until the 60s. Legal, but definitely not good. Yeah, I get it. I'm just pointing out that it's unjust. If my wife truly felt remorse, she'd give me whatever I asked for. Especially considering she won't need a ton of money herself. And here she is, still lingering in the house even after I told her to leave. It's like facing a never-ending cycle of being pestered and disturbed in my own damn home. My logic behind it was simple. The kids want to stick with me, and they're upset and scarred by this whole mess. How would it look if the divorce turns out lopsided? At least she managed to grasp that it's bad, though she's got that part right. Strangely, our marriage seemed to improve after her affair therapy, which only makes this whole situation worse. My kids are almost grown, practically adults. I'm not sure what those idiots will do when my kids decide to just move out and come over to my place on her days. I can already hear them trying to point fingers at me, but that's par for the course, I guess. I'm here knocking on your door today because your kids have had enough of your lousy ex-wife's place. Yeah, she might lose her temper anytime or decide to give your son another dose of inappropriate pictures, but that's just the way it is. Hand over your kids to the state, or there'll be consequences. I never signed up to be a commodity, any time or day. When I went ahead and filed for divorce, I paid a visit to my pastor to have a heart-to-heart. Now, my pastor's an expert when it comes to dealing with infidelity, and he had my back on the call I made. I don't need some therapist telling me it's all my fault, or my wife was dealing with some deep sorrow or sickness, especially after seeing what her so-called swinger therapist advised her to do. I'd rather skip that circus if you ask me. I'm not turning the kids against her. They've decided they're sticking with me no matter what. Though I did drop a hint that if I end up shelling out big bucks, we'll all know she was just feeding us a pack of lies about being truly sorry, which is damn true. It's not just about her cheating. It's about those 15 long years of being played like a fiddle, 15 years of my life swiped from right under me. If this all came out just a month ago and I learned about it today, maybe I'd be fine with some sort of division or whatever else. Gratitude. That's what I'm asking for. She's flat out refusing to put her signature on those divorce papers and isn't up for discussing the whole divorce deal, claiming she's all about keeping the family glued together while I'm looking to break it all apart. With her dragging her feet and adding to the family's misery by playing the "I won't talk about it" card, we've decided to let the kids take the call on who they want to be with. I've been keeping it straight up, no beating around the bush. I won't feed them any lies or keep vital info from them. There are some details I haven't shared because they wouldn't be of much help anyway. They've got a good sense of what's right and what's not. They're almost adults, and they can figure out how to handle things themselves. Still, I'm not going to keep things hidden from them. So, eventually, she made the move to leave once she realized the kids weren't interested in hearing her out. Even though she's showing remorse and has clocked in hours in therapy, that affair seems like ancient history to her. Maybe it doesn't click for her why we're all worked up. But let me tell you, for me, that sense of betrayal is as fresh as ever. It might take her some time to grasp the fact that our marriage is done and dusted, but eventually she'll get it. I'm not waiting around forever, though. I'm going ahead with the divorce, whether she's on board or not. She's been a master of lying, deceiving, and backstabbing for 15 of our 20-year marriage. Truth is, Our entire time together has been a sham. The only silver lining in this mess is my kids, and they've picked the right side to stand on. Now, as for my mom, she's crossed a line that's unerasable. Might seem tough, but I've drawn the line. I won't ever talk to her again as long as she lives. Story 2. I'm 31 years old and have had my fair share of toxic relationships in the past. But meeting my current girlfriend, who's 26, felt like a breath of fresh air. She's amazing, and you know the story. We had that deep, forever kind of love going on. My buddies couldn't help but keep saying how lucky I was this time around. My best pal even teased that she was like an angel. I thought the same. When I met her family, they embraced me like I was already one of them. My own family kept singing her praises while highlighting the stark contrast between her and my ex. She had a better character and was even more beautiful. Everybody warmed up to her quickly, cautioning me not to let past hurts get in the way of this beautiful relationship I was in, as if I needed a reminder. There wasn't much from my previous relationship that was bothering me anyway. She was gradually wiping away those old wounds. In our 3rd year together, I surprised her with a ring during a dinner and popped the question, asking her to marry me. She said yes, but with a condition. She wanted me to put more effort into asking for her hand in marriage. And so, the preparations for our grand engagement party kicked off. Everyone was thrilled, and they all pitched in to help organize the event, although there wasn't much left to do. The girl of the hour had already hired a party planner to take care of most things. The only thing left was to finalize her outfit. One of my pals, a professional fashion designer, offered to create the dresses, but she kindly declined. She said her best friend, who was also a skilled fashion designer, had offered to make the dresses for a low cost, not that money was an issue. I didn't like her friend. Not because he had done anything wrong. It was just the way he hugged my girl, gave her a peck on the cheek, put his arm around her waist, and all those annoyingly familiar gestures that got under my skin. He wasn't a fan of me either. We had a confrontation where he insisted I wasn't good enough for his friend. Maybe he had a point, but I was determined to step up and be exactly what she needed. Eventually, we suppressed our dislike for a common reason: our love for my girl. He came to our place to take her measurements. We were living together until the party was done. The whole process got on my nerves. Those moments when his fingers seemed to linger around her chest and how he took his sweet time adjusting the tape around her waist drove me crazy. After he left, I voiced my frustration, and she just laughed it off, assuring me it was harmless. She said her friend was a good guy who was going the extra mile to do a great job, but he definitely didn't strike me as a good guy. I was a guy who could tell a good man when I saw one. When I kept insisting that her judgment was off, she asked if our marriage was going to be like this. Me trying to mess up her friendship just because I felt insecure. I quickly said sorry to her and comforted myself with the thought that she was mine, not her best friend's. Whatever he felt for her, it wouldn't amount to anything real. A few days later, she let me know she was going for a fitting session. When she got back that day, she said one of the 3 dresses had a small mistake, so she'd go back for another fitting once it was fixed. This became a routine. Her friend's fashion place became like her second home. Almost every day, she'd be there for fittings. When I couldn't handle it anymore, I confronted her about choosing her friend's service when he wasn't the pro she claimed he was. She got really angry and warned me to keep away from her friendships. We never talked about her dress issue again. A week before the party, I got home at night and found her sister, who said she had gone to her friend's for another fitting. I decided to head over there myself. A feeling inside me said there wasn't actually anything wrong with her dress. She was likely just obsessing to make it absolutely perfect. So I arrived there and noticed the closed sign on the front glass. The lights were off, but the window shades were up, indicating someone was inside. I walked in and saw her and her friend being very intimate, holding and touching each other. Strangely, I didn't feel surprised. Maybe deep down, I had already sensed something like this. I just stood there, watching her scramble to cover up, while her friend leaned against the counter with a smug grin on his face. As she tried to get herself together, she turned to me and started crying, insisting that things weren't what they seemed. I asked her to explain, but she couldn't give a clear answer, so I left. She tried to follow me, but I heard her friend telling her to get dressed first. I got into my car and sped away, scolding myself for taking so long to figure out who she truly was. When I got home, I told her sister about what I had discovered, and she got really angry, even angrier than I was. She kept repeating, "Not again." I didn't get the chance to ask her what she meant because she left shortly after that. After that, I phoned her dad and shared what I had witnessed. It was clear that her parents were devastated and embarrassed. They disclosed that she had ruined 2 previous relationships due to her cheating, but they thought this situation was different. So, that's my current situation. Tough luck for me. It's been a year since that awful night, and I've come to terms with the betrayal. I joined a couple of support groups, and they proved to be quite helpful. About 5 months ago, I bumped into her, and she had a whole bunch of explanations to offer. Most of them boiled down to her ridiculous claim. She was bored. What an absurd reason to cheat on someone who cared for you. She even had the audacity to argue that it wasn't cheating since she wasn't in love with her friend. She suggested counseling as if that would make me come back to her. As if it would save the day. I told her I'd rather live in a pigsty than accept her back. She got angry and insisted that if I didn't want her, I should at least tell her family that she hadn't cheated on me. They had refused to speak with her until she convinced them that she was innocent. Yep, she spun a tale to her folks about her innocence, but they weren't buying it. They knew better, considering it wasn't her first time caught cheating. I made it clear to her that I wouldn't lift a finger in her favor, even if hell froze over. She tried to pull a stunt in public, yelling that I was treating her badly. But I turned the tables on her, letting the little crowd she gathered know that she had cheated on me. I even suggested calling her parents as witnesses. When she realized I meant business, she bolted from the scene. Haven't crossed paths with her since then, and I sure hope it stays that way. Story 3. My wife and I ran a bakery for 5 years. It was more her thing than mine, really. Baking was her true passion, and I happily played the role of her assistant. My own passion, though, was voice acting and doing impersonations. I was just starting to earn some extra money using my skills, so I wasn't too thrilled about spending time at the bakery. My wife started getting frustrated with me because I didn't share her enthusiasm. I never thought it would cause problems between us, but it ended up doing just that. Then, one day, I was helping out at the bakery when a familiar customer walked in. I knew him, let's call him AP, for quite a while, but this time, he seemed disappointed to see me behind the counter. It was like he almost wanted to leave right then. I took his order for his daughter's birthday cake and he kept glancing towards the back. He also asked how my wife was doing. When he left, I mentioned to my wife that he had been in and placed an order. She glanced at me with curiosity, then seemed disappointed, and turned her attention back to her dough-covered hands. She mentioned how much she enjoyed interacting with customers because she takes pride in our business. I gave a vague response like, since I was eager to head home and work on recording voices. On another occasion, her phone buzzed on the counter up front, while her hands were still messy. I went to take a look to see if it was something important or related to the business. As I passed by, I noticed her looking worried. When I checked her phone, I understood why she was concerned. It was a text from that married guy who had ordered the birthday cake for his daughter. While my wife was busy preparing the cake, he texted her, suggesting they meet up again that evening at 7 when his wife and kids wouldn't be home. My jaw practically hit the floor as I read it. Then another text popped up saying how he missed being close to her. In a mix of shock and disbelief, I entered my wife's phone passcode for the first time in a year. Luckily, it hadn't changed. As I scrolled through the messages, I was bombarded with explicit content, sexting, and evidence of the affair. My wife grew impatient in the back room and kept asking me who the messages were from. I told her it was a spam email that fooled me for a moment. She chuckled a bit and seemed relieved while she placed the little girl's cake into the oven. I mentioned to my wife that I needed to head home because I had some voice acting work to do. I knew she'd buy it and not bother me further, as arguing with me about it never got her anywhere. In reality, I parked my car nearby and stared at my wife's GPS location. I hadn't relied on this method before, and I could only hope she wouldn't disable it. I held my breath as she began to move down the road. I started trailing her, and within seconds, a text arrived from my wife explaining she'd be keeping the store open late due to a large order. It was a heart-wrenching moment for me. Then I noticed her GPS signal changing direction, and deep down, I knew it was the end. She was having an affair with our married customer. I kept driving, struggling to keep my focus, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The locator was still on, so she led me straight to the married guy's house. Just as she got out of the car, his front door swung open, and my world shattered. I confronted them both at his front door, and honestly, I can't even remember exactly what I was saying. All I knew was that I was shouting and glaring at them. AP seemed lost, just shouting out apologies and scrambling to close the door as fast as he could. But I halted his attempt by delivering a punch right to his face. He dropped to the floor inside his house, unconscious. My wife looked stunned and flushed, lost for words. I demanded an explanation from her, but she was too shocked and mortified to utter a single word. She was taken aback by my punch, but all she managed to say was sorry. The haze of the affair lifted and she finally realized where we were, standing in front of AP's house, all because she had gotten herself involved with him. A married man and a father, a guy who had no business being anything more than just a customer to us. I found myself yelling again as memories of our wedding day and the start of our business flooded my mind. I hurried back to the car before the tears could start flowing, realizing that our life had been irrevocably changed, and she had probably done this more than once. I couldn't shake the memory of all the messages they had exchanged, and the way she had lied to me. Sadness transformed into anger, so I drove back home, leaving her behind in AP's driveway. I gathered my belongings and printed out notices to stick on the bakery windows. As she returned home, I was already on my way down the street, heading back to AP's place. The front door was closed now, and another car was in the driveway. Everything looked peaceful, but that wouldn't last. I placed copies of my notice in their mailbox, on their doors, hidden in some bushes, and a few on their windows. The notice revealed my wife and AP in a sexual scandal that labeled the bakery as tainted. I quoted some of the explicit things they had said to each other and even included a clothless photo of each of them. After that, I reported the situation to the health department. Hours later, the entire town was in turmoil. People were chattering rapidly about the scandal. You don't realize how small a world can be until it all comes crashing down. Before the divorce was even finalized and before the health department officially mandated her closure due to the loss of customers, my wife shut down the business. She left the state by herself with her SUV packed full, heading towards someone she had met online in search of a roommate. Since she couldn't afford the house without the bakery, I got to keep it. I sold the house, and just like that, everything we had built together was dissolved. Amidst all this, she did try to reach out to me. Through her attempts, I found out that AP was actually divorced, but they decided not to continue their relationship. He had to move 120 miles in the opposite direction. She would repeatedly apologize and claim to understand why I ended our relationship. When I asked her why all of this happened, she could only say that he complimented her cooking and made flattering comments, like wishing she were his wife. I responded by telling her I wouldn't wish for her to be anyone's wife. After that conversation, I stopped answering her calls. I knew she might be feeling scared or overwhelmed, but I didn't want to get caught up in her situation. I focused on my own healing and well-being. With the profit from the house sale, which I didn't want to see again, I found a wonderful new place to call home. This new place even has a home office that's perfect for my voice acting and impersonation career.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click on the little bell icon for notifications of new stories.